Hi there. Gnosis and the imagination. If you're a follower of A.J. Ayres and the English school of philosophy, you will know that there ain't nothing more than matter. By which I mean, you have objects in the world and they are perceived, and these perceptions are processed by the brain, which give rise to all sorts of responses, cognitive responses, affective or emotional responses, and also physical responses as well. And but of course, obviously, immediately you're going to say, what happens when you cut your leg off? And you can still feel the leg is attached to your body, the so-called phantom pain that people experience, which is quite bad actually. So obviously that is something different, although something pretty interesting as well. But anyway, so it follows a general pathway from matter to brain, and brain is matter, processing computer of great complexity. And somebody said to me, though, that thinking of the brain as a collection of algorithms doesn't explain everything. To which I replied, well, it's just because they haven't discovered yet all the algorithmic patterns that are available to the brain in its mentalizations. But fear not, we will discover them. And we'll discover also the parts of the brain that account for just about, well, everything that you actually think and feel and do. And these areas of the brain, of course, will have been created as a result of genetics. So, as a hard-headed geneticist and scientist and neurological scientist, you have to go along with the materialist base for everything, really. At least if you're one of the English philosophers, the English school of philosophy. And A.J. Ayres goes into great detail, proving philosophically why this should be the case, and no other case. There's no metaphysics. This is all just physics. And when the brain ceases to function, you can no longer perceive the world because you're dead. Now, of course, this part here is quite interesting because this is a lot of what we cognize. It refers to or is called imagination, which is sort of conscious reverie. And then there's the dream state, which could be called unconscious reverie. And you are not really much in control of the unconscious reverie, although a lot of people do learn how to direct their dreams, by the way, so that's quite interesting. So there's a sort of, there's a kind of a grey area between unconscious and conscious, where people are able to take control of their dreams and direct their dreams, and they occupy a sort of a little space between two sets here, one of which is the conscious, one of which is the unconscious. And of course, we all know about conscious reverie. We had that at school when you couldn't be bothered to listen to the teacher, and we went off into a fantasy world of our own. Or at least you did in the old days when it was all lockstep. But now you don't get any chance to imagine anything because you're in little groups, and everybody's talking and making noise, and there's no possibility of going off into any dream world, which I think could be a bad thing, actually. Anyway, but I digress. Bring back the old lockstep method of teaching. That's what I say. It was much more peaceful and more quiet and less stimulating and less frenetic on students generally. Depending on age, of course. But anyway, I've already said they were very bored at school, so there we are. Nobody's happy about anything that happens at school, are they really? Neither modernist or classical education. No one's happy. Anyway, but I do digress now. The point is, they have this thing called imagination or dream, ID, which is does that stand for id, the impulsive part of the brain? Maybe so, because in this imaginative world, it's possible to create anything and do anything and think anything and feel anything and create any scenario And some of these imaginings and dreams, of course, seem incredibly real, incredibly real. So, classically, people said this must refer to something real, something real which is not of the real that we can perceive with our senses. So, we're talking about something here which is, you could put a line down here and have two categories. One is a materialist view, which is fair enough, and you have a brain for that. But then you have the imaginative sort of view, imagination, referring to some imaginary, some world which, well, in dreams you are, and in some visions you are connecting to this world. But it could be argued that with your imagination you are actually creating these worlds. So it's not just a passive sort of viewing of these other dimensions. You're actually creating other dimensions with your imagination. You're creating other worlds, other galaxies far far away, and everything. And if you see films and movies, if you're a movie buff, and if you play a lot of computer games, when you go to sleep at night and you dream of the computer game, which a lot of people do, then in a sense you're creating the world of the computer game in some kind of dimension that is other than the material, you see. So there's both a passive and active aspects to imagination and dream. But people like the idea that you're actually tuning into or sort of spying, as it were, looking through the keyhole at another dimension, which is every bit as real as the reality that we perceive with our five senses. You see, and it was supposed in the sort of Cartesian sense that there could be a sort of a nexus of consciousness called soul, which was doing this perception. It was your soul that was looking through the keyhole, or it was your soul that was creating these galaxies far, far away, either as a result of listening to stories or creating your own stories. And as a result, people tended to believe that the soul was a nexus of great power, great creative power. In fact, you could say that the imagination, the dream time, is really a consciousness which is greater than our material, our neurological consciousness, our brain consciousness. Of course, in those days, they didn't know that the brain was particularly as sophisticated as we believe it to be now. So, a lot of materialists could argue that this is all hocus pocus, and that there is no soul. It is just the brain referring to itself. The brain is creating patterns, and you still need the brain to do that. If the brain is dead, then no more dreams, no more imagination, no more perception, no more cognition, no more nothing. Okay, which is why humanists say that this pertains to humanist morality, because when you're dead, and therefore to preserve life is very important, and that we should not take life unless we really, really have to, because taking life from somebody is a very serious business. Whereas if you believe in soul, taking life from somebody is not that big a deal, because the soul, as it was believed, was permanent and could not be killed and could not kill, and indeed was looking through this keyhole to another dimension, which at death the soul would go into and go through to, as it were. And some people even said that you could create the dimension that you were going to at death. So in life, with your imagination and with your dreams and reveries and visions, and various techniques to stimulate your imagination and your dreams and your visions, you could actually create a world which was then waiting for you metaphysically, actually for you to enter at death. So not only could you, so there we are. I mean, you can actually create your own heaven or basically your own hell as well, as a result of your consciousness, as a result of this special soul consciousness. As a result, now all this is all very well and good, but there's no doubt about it that it all depends upon having a brain, to put it in modernist terms. And so, therefore, you could argue that dreams and imagination and reveries and visions and and sort of hallucinogen visions a result of hallucinogens or whatever, these are still referring to a material brain. They have a material base. So, in Gnostic terms, if we think of this world and the next world, with all our dreams and reveries and imaginations and what have you, we still haven't got out of the material world. We're still part of that material world. Whereas the Gnostic believes that there is a world that is utterly other than anything that we could possibly conceive of, imagine, have a dream about, have a vision about, anything at all. Which, of course, immediately is a contradiction in terms, because then how are we ever to perceive such a world if it's beyond anything that we can dream of, conceive of, have a reverie about, have an hallucination about, have a vision about? If it's really, really so other than what we can perceive or what we can dream of, etc., then how is it useful? How, what possible use has it, really? And when you think about the brain, it's terribly useful. And it doesn't seem that such a soul as conceived of by the Gnostics is terribly useful, because it doesn't actually give us any data, and it doesn't give us any access to any data. It's something that we know not of, and we'll never know anything of. So even if there is life after death, even if this soul goes back to heaven and is reunited with God, etc., etc., well, how is there anything in it for us, as it were, within our consciousness as we know it now? And even a changed consciousness, how is that useful? Because it's not enough even to have a dream or an hallucination or a vision or to direct your imagination. And there's no metaphysics. Your imagination isn't creating anything. And yet there is this metaphysical soul, apparently, which is beyond human sort of thing, transhuman, as one might say. And so, therefore, Gnosticism does run into a philosophical difficulty here. And a lot of people, Gnostics, of course, still go on about, the seat of the soul is in the imagination. The seat of the soul is in a spontaneous vision, a transcendental experience, a result of transcendental meditation of some method. And what is presented to you during times of different consciousness, as it were, expanded consciousness in quotation marks, then that is either the reality that does exist beyond death, or the reality that you can actually create, which lies beyond death as a result of your imagination. So, but as I say, does that go far enough? Is that radical enough? In fact, is that really just still pertaining to a physical, neurological model of the universe? We really want a metaphysics which really, really doesn't depend on the brain. And yet it would seem that we are dependent on our brain as a material substance or stuff or operation or algorithmic patterning. And that algorithmic patterning of brainwaves is indeed ultimately a physical thing, or physically generated. And without that physical generation, you don't have anything. So if the light bulb isn't switched on, the light bulb isn't illuminating anything, is it? It's not functioning. So materialism is about functionality, rather than about anything else. But of course, you could argue that meaning is what we're actually talking about here. So synchronicity is two events which happen together, which cause a certain cognition of meaning to arise, for example. And what people call, coincidence is called synchronicity, because because two events happen, and that is taken as a significant occurrence. But yet again, your materialists will say, well, you still need your brain to perceive the synchronicity. Without the brain, there is no synchronicity. Without the brain, there is no nothing. There isn't anything at all. It really is the void. And we avoid the void at all possible, and all animals avoid the void because they all understand that at death everything ceases to function, and you can't remember a time before you were born, because there wasn't any function there, and you won't remember or you won't experience anything after death because there's no function there either. You see. Because when you're a little ball of cells growing in the uterus, obviously there was no function there because your brain hadn't developed yet, for example. The materialist is pretty confident of their philosophical position, to be perfectly honest with you, and the atheist really is as well. Even the deist, I would say, is pretty confident, because it seems to me that what we actually have here is a deist model. We actually have here a sort of realm which is beyond the material, which nevertheless cannot be accessed by anything material, or anything that is based on material, or anything that is functioned or based on the functioning of the material, you see. So metaphysics has always been a problem. And some people have returned to this thing about meaning, that when we're alive, we distill out a lot of meaning from our beliefs and from our imagination and from our reveries and visions and hallucinogenic experiences, etc. And this meaning is what is important, rather than arguing about what is real and what is not real. And that is called, I think that is probably sort of like a postmodernist view, which, according to people like Grayling isn't going to cut it either, because meaning is based on material function. Without the material functioning of the brain, you don't have any meaning. And of course, people then retort, well, you don't have any meaning if you don't think there's anything other than just brain. Which atheists and secularists and humanists also would disagree with. They say they have plenty of meaning in their lives, derived from moral behaviour, pro-social behaviour, the enjoyment of the moment, the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of technological innovation and business innovation, etc., etc. So they're quite happy with the fact that they don't have religious meaning. They have plenty of meaning in their lives. They don't need a metaphysics to give them a meaning. So these are the kind of criticisms, as it were, of metaphysics upon which Gnosticism is very much based. And if its metaphysics is really, really beyond the physics of the world, then it seems that we can't get through this contradiction. How do we access the data? How can we experience this ineffable world that lies beyond the material? There doesn't seem to be any particular way that we can do it. So Gnostics tend to talk about bridges, and they talk about the experience of the bridge, which does connect you to the stream of metaphysical data, which is real, and that's basically all they can come up with, which is nothing more than the sort of medieval way of looking at consciousness. That consciousness creates other dimensions and other realities, and consciousness even can create miracles to happen as in through magic. But also you can see that you can have this keyhole experience where you're looking into the vast beyond, the realm of God, and you're perceiving that as because it is real, because it actually is real, even though it lies beyond what we think of as reality. So there's things to ponder here, and of course it's natural that Gnostics and theists should on a daily basis encounter doubt within themselves. And because you can see that philosophically this doubt has a great power, and that doubt you can doubt your experiences, you can doubt your faith, for example, and doubt is something which is actually part of theism and part of Gnosticism, in fact. Even though a lot of Gnostics say that there is no room for doubt in Gnosticism, I think there probably is actually a great deal of room for doubt to arise. And it's up to every individual Gnostic or theist to cope with that doubt as best they can. And really, this is about all that I can offer rationally for you to take away and contemplate. And if that seems inadequate to you, if you know, if like the Jesuits said of Descartes that he didn't provide good enough arguments for the existence of God, and therefore that's why they condemned him. And actually, that's why he had to stay in Holland, because they would have burnt him at the stake. In actual fact, for not making a good enough case for the existence of God in the Jesuits' eyes. That's all I can do. I can only sort of prevent a very inadequate argument, like Descartes, which is easily overturned in terms of philosophy and rational argument, which also the Jesuits didn't like because it sort of undermines your faith. They wanted a rational-based faith, but there isn't such a thing as rational-based faith. And Gnostics also reject faith as well. So they're even in even more trouble philosophically as well, really. So anyway, but don't let me put you off for anything. I think doubt is the cross which all people that believe in God have to bear, actually. And I don't think it's something that you can get away from. And I don't think it's something that you can hate in other people, because it's within yourself for sure. And that really causes theists, or should cause theists, to be a lot more tolerant of doubt than they actually are. So don't be insecure if you have doubt. Doubt is part of the theistic and Gnostic path, in my opinion.